Let me listen to what he said again.
The act before you, be sustained on data security grounds? And our answer to that has to be no. You don't have to look any further than the divestiture provision itself, which says that the content recommendation algorithm cannot be used in the future. Well, that has nothing to do with...
That's not true. I don't believe that's what this says. It's saying that the president determines through an interagency process, so the president has to figure out, so this is for a qualified divestiture, right, to see if you are able to divest, right? The president determines and then precludes the establishment or maintenance of any operational relationship between the United States operations of the relevant foreign adversary-controlled application, so TikTok, and any formally affiliated entities that are controlled by a foreign adversary, including any cooperation with respect to the operation of a content recommendation algorithm or an agreement with respect to data sharing. I don't think this is saying that you can't even use the algorithm. It's saying that you can no longer cooperate with them, with that foreign entity, with respect to the operation of the algorithm. That's my understanding of that. So unless there's some other, my reading is bad, it feels like he's just misreading that provision.
Has to be no. You don't have to look any further than the divestiture provision itself, which says that the content recommendation algorithm cannot be used in the future. Well, that has nothing to do with data security. So the core feature of the divestiture provision is going at content manipulation, which I said is impermissible. You can't uphold that under data security grounds. And the rest of the act, when you look at the covered companies provision, Justice Jackson, if this were primarily a data security law, what you think you'd find is what kind of data is procured? How is it stored? Is it shared? Those are the things you think you'd find under covered companies, but you don't find that. What you find is, are text images shared? Is content being shared between users? Is it being created and posted in a social media platform? So I don't dispute for one second that data security is a very important thing, and Congress in this very law regulated data security in other ways with data brokers. That's perfectly permissible. But the question before you today was narrower. The question is this law before you sustainable on data security grounds? And
I feel like that's a really good argument. I'm surprised the other lawyer. Are these guys allowed to coordinate at all? If we're so concerned about data security, why is nothing of the covered company? Why don't we even have one part in here? Shouldn't part 5 just say stores user content or something?
That answer has to be no.
Congress doesn't care about what's on TikTok. They don't care about the expression. That's shown by the remedy. They're not saying TikTok has to stop. They're saying the Chinese have to stop control.
That's shown by the remedy? What an unbelievably dog shit fucking argument. Why is his eyes bloodshot in this picture? He almost looks like a Doom guy. That's like saying, I'm going to make a law that says all black people need to die, and the way to do this is to shoot them all in the face. And it's well, shooting people in the face would kill anybody. That's not... I hate Roberts. Sorry.
TikTok. So it's not a direct burden on the expression at all. Congress is fine with the expression. They're not fine with a foreign adversary, as they've determined it is, gathering all this information about the 170 million people who use TikTok.
Well, again, Mr. Chief Justice, if I may, let me separate the where you started, which was the content manipulation, and then go to the data security part of it. So,
well, the first part was not. I'm not talking about the content manipulation. I'm talking about the content harvesting.
When you say content harvesting, do you mean people's data?
They've got all the information, whatever algorithms they want, that has access to the personal information, or at least information that is not readily available, about 170 million Americans. And whether they're going to use it in 10 or 15 years, when those people grow up and have different jobs in different places, or whether they're going to use it now. That, at least as I look at the congressional record, is what Congress was concerned about.
Well, I think
and they're not concerned about the fact that it is available. As I said, the remedy is just somebody else has to run TikTok. So they're not concerned about the content. They're concerned about what the foreign adversary is doing.
So if I may, I think to answer your question properly, I think I have to separate two things.
Oh, man. Here's an interesting counter argument. I don't know if anybody brings up. If that was the primary concern of the Congress, wouldn't it be better, like the other guy said, to have a law about disclosures Because if we're truly worried about ByteDance using this data for nefarious purposes, well, once they have cut off access to TikTok and they go back to China, now they literally have no incentive not to use that data in the worst way possible, right? Supposedly, according to Congress, they probably already own it all. They already have it. Well, fuck it. We're cut off from TikTok. Let's go to the US and be as nefarious as fucking... Let's literally publish all of this information publicly on every single user, because fuck them. Why not, right? But... if TikTok remains operational in the United States and they instead have to do like disclosures on data or allow some level of like federal oversight or whatever, depending on how those disclosures work, isn't that arguably more in a data protection world? Because now they at least have to adhere to US data restrictions or protections or disclosures or whatever else. Like, why wouldn't that be discussed at all?
Things. One is the content recommendation algorithm, and that's what I was speaking about a moment ago. That has nothing to do with data security. That doesn't itself procure data. That just determines what videos people see on their feed on TikTok. As to that, I think the answer is inescapably that the government and Congress itself was worried about content. The government itself is here saying national security. So like a mix of cat videos or dance videos doesn't affect national security. No matter what happens, the only thing that can affect data security, national security, are the substance of those videos. And when the government's pressed in its briefing, it outright tells you that. It says what we're really worried about is sowing doubts about US leaders, et cetera. So let me turn then to data security. Yes,
Also, I don't know if, does equal protections have to bring up like protected classes, or do protected classes come from equal protections? Can you invoke equal protections for non-protected classes stuff? Because let's say that it was the case that these disclosures were required to be made by TikTok or ByteDance. Fuck. I'm not a big fan of enemy countries trying to fuck my shit up. However, I don't trust the fuckers that run the companies here. Like, shouldn't any, like, wouldn't it be, I don't know if this would count as equal protection or not, but like, wouldn't it fail to burden TikTok in this way, but not Facebook and X and YouTube? Shouldn't they have to make the same types of disclosures?
There were various congresspersons, and in the record that we have in the DC circuit, there were conversation about the problem of data security here. As I said, I don't dispute that that is a valid governmental interest. So I think you addressed whether that alone can sustain the act in two steps. First, you would ask, if you have an impermissible motive and a permissible one, can we sustain the act based on the based simply on the permissible motive?
No, of course not.
And I think for the reasons Mr. Francisco said, and we lay out in our brief, that alone, the answer is no under Hunter against Underwood and other cases. Even if you could get just to the data security question, again, you'd have to ask the question, would this law have been passed by Congress for data security reasons? Because you're being asked to uphold a law based on that single governmental interest. And when you look through the provisions, like the content recommendation algorithm provision, like the covered company provisions, the answer is no. And if you're still in doubt on that, just go back to the under-inclusiveness problem. Would a Congress really worried about these very dramatic risks leave out an e-commerce site like Temu that has 70 million Americans using it, and every bit the connection?
Does Congress have to go all or nothing on that? I mean,
They don't have to, but it certainly speaks to the motivations, no?
Doesn't have to go all or nothing.
they isolate a particular problem, and they might be getting to what you're talking about next. Who knows? But you're really sitting up there and saying Congress would not pass the divestiture law if data security were the only interest.
So I'm saying it would not have passed this divestiture law
Yes.
if data security were the only interest. It's very curious why you just single out TikTok alone and not other companies with tens of millions of people having their own data taken, in the process of engaging with those websites, and equally, if not more, available to Chinese control. So I'm not trying to say that Congress has to do everything at once. I'm trying to say that once you've concluded that content manipulation, for the reasons I've said, as a matter of our history and tradition, has to be impermissible.
Is there
Also, just like this, I don't know why they do this. Maybe there's a reason why. This legislation literally names TikTok and ByteDance. Literally. I think they're the only companies that are named that are named in this legislation.
another site like this one that covers half the American population? Okay.
I don't think, just by way of sheer numbers, Justice Sotomayor, that The answer has to be no, but 70
All right, now
million seems like a lot.
170 million is a lot, but put that aside and then go to the next question, which is, how many of these sites have all of the data collection mechanisms that TikTok has? From what I understand,
Careful. So Sotomayor is making the government's argument here. You guys in chat are saying things like, so somebody just said, Temu doesn't inform millions of Americans, lol. That's not the argument. The argument has to do with data collection. If you start talking about Temu doesn't inform them, then you're implicating speech, which the government doesn't want to do because that makes it a significantly harder case, I think. But Jesus. I feel like I got like 20 cop cars. What the fuck is going on? Wait, hold on. Fuck, they all drove away. Fuck them. Damn, somebody blown up the bridge?
from the briefs, not only is it getting your information, it's asking, and most people give it permission to access your contact list, whether that contact list has permitted them to or not. Mm-hmm. So they can now have data about all of your contacts and anything you say about them. How many other sites gather information by keystrokes to be able to do voice and finger ID information if they choose? And there's a whole lot of data stuff that was discussed in the brief that I don't think any other website gathers. So wouldn't this be a unique site? If I viewed the evidence that way, how would this be under-inclusive?
Well, it's just strange because you're speaking so much about data collection, which is what this is supposed to be about, but the act itself doesn't really speak to data collection. It speaks to content, right? When it's talking about the covered parties here, it's not saying people that store some type of information. I don't know if it actually speaks to any information stored at all, unless you say creates an account or profile to generate, share, and view text, images, videos, real-time communications, similar content. I don't think it speaks to any type of data storage. So it's interesting, it's a law targeting people based on improper data storage or improper use of data stored, but it never speaks to data stored and only speaks to the type of content created, right?
Justice Sotomayor, I don't think a lot of the suppositions you're making actually bear out. And as Justice Gorsuch was pointing out, one of the obviously the real challenges in this case is it comes to you without an ordinary trial record compiled and all the rest. So we have only limited amounts of information, but absolutely these other websites are taking much the same kind of information, if not more. And as to the contact list thing, I think that points out one other aspect of this. That is voluntary decision by an American user to share that information. You know, in the Riley case.
But not informed. And
well,
even if
that could be solved. If you don't think it's informed,
if you don't think it's informed, then write legislation for it, no?
That is voluntary decision by an American user to share that information. You know, in the Riley case.
But not informed. And
well,
even if informed.
That could be solved. If you don't think it's informed, that could be solved by a warning or disclosure.
No, they can't be, because for the United States, the threat of using that information is what is at issue. It's not whether the user thinks it's okay.
The threat of using that information is what's at issue. I mean, what is that implied through the fact that it's an adversarial controlled?
It's whether the U.S. believes that it could put sites at issue. But let me ask you one last question and fundamental question. Assuming that content neutral data collection concerns were is one of Congress's provisions, divest because of this. Why can't we separate that out from how we analyze the algorithm question? And couldn't we sever the two provisions to say divestiture is right, but you can't force them not to discuss algorithm?
Well, I think the reason why you can't do that was Mr. Francisco explained. I thought I'd direct you to a case like Hunter against Underwood and just analogize it to this situation. If what you had is the government saying, we are shutting down TikTok or requiring divestiture for two reasons. One, because we think it helps the Democratic Party too much. And number two, because we're concerned about data. I think that first interest would be a poison pill. That would be an impermissible, or because we think there's too much pro-Catholic content on TikTok. I think there are some interests that are just so constitutionally verboten that I think that just makes the act unconstitutional, and you can't go looking for other interests. You send it back to Congress. Look, if you want to pass a data security law free and clear of this impermissible interest, you go ahead and do it.
Counsel.
Can I say one other thing, Justice Sotomayor, just because I think it is also telling here that even if you didn't buy that poison pill argument and you just asked whether Congress would have passed this law, something else that I think you might notice is even if all this act goes into effect and the law goes through, TikTok gets to keep all the data. So wouldn't
that's my argument. And more importantly, ByteDance gets to keep all the data, right?
the data security law require them to expunge that data or get rid of it or something?
Yeah, where is the argument about what the fuck? There's nothing in this act whatsoever about the data itself. Not a single thing. Like, theoretically, TikTok could shut down and just pass all the data over to China. I don't know if there's any data protection laws in the United States that would even prevent that from happening.
I mean, it's a very weird law if you're just looking at it through a data security lens, and maybe Congress could do better.
True.
Mr. Fisher, often
Or do anything at all. Not do better, do anything about data protection.
require divestiture for antitrust reasons, for example. And as I take it, your argument here, and we don't think of those as normally implicating the First Amendment interests of users or people who might speak or associate with editors. And the difference here is, as I understand it in your mind, that this law is motivated by a content-based interest.
If the U.S. was trying to delete it, would they? Just make them send it back. What do you mean? And then once they've sent it all back, you'll know you have it.
Is that a fair summary?
I think that, and the only thing I would add to it is just the prior step, which it is regulating the speech itself for content-based reasons.
Yeah.
Yes.
We don't do that in the antitrust area, but
Exactly.
you say this law does. Okay.
Exactly.
And it does on the covert content manipulation side. Do you think that's a compelling interest or not? Forget about the tailoring for a moment.
No, my point is that preventing content manipulation, whether it's covert or not,
Is simply not
impermissible if what you mean by content manipulation are the kinds of interests the government is saying, like undermining trust in our leaders, undermining trust in
Whitney and
democracy.
Abrams in your
That's Whitney and Abrams, and like those cases.
I got it.
Yeah.
I got it.
So, Mr. Fisher,
Just a couple more. I'm sorry. I'll finish up real quick.
This is Gorsuch, right? Gorsuch is going to be the sole dissenting voice with Amy and just her writing in concurrence, not in dissent, but she'll write a concurrence saying that like the government went too far again, or the court did, because Roberts is a cuck.
And so that would take us to the tailoring question. And there you say disclosure and alerting Americans that there is covert content manipulation possibility, putting aside the data collection.
Are you leaning right now? It sounds like they're going to super fucking fuck TikTok is going to be fucked. But I haven't heard the other side argue yet, so maybe who knows? We'll see.
Part of it.
Yeah.
Telling Americans that there is covert content manipulation going on in TikTok, or at least it's possible. And the government says that's just simply not enough. And the D.C. Circuit did too, and I wanted to give you a chance to respond to that.
Right, so I think that's the only aspect of the governmental interest that could be permissible, the covert part. And my answer, as you just said, is disclosure solves that problem. And you have a long-standing law, which we haven't talked about yet today, that gives you that example. Again, under a history and tradition test, you look at not just precedent, but laws and traditions of our country. Look at the Foreign Agent Registration Act, passed in the run-up to World War II. And the concern was Americans would be controlled by foreign agents to speak and advocate certain causes.
We didn't ban them.
You did not ban them. All you did is require, Congress, all Congress did was require disclosure.
Yes.
I wasn't around for that. On the secret evidence point, I'm concerned.
Laugh, we like Gorsuch here, okay? No matter what Pisco says to you, we like Gorsuch.
About the government's attempt to lodge secret evidence in this case without providing any mechanism for opposing counsel to review it. And I expressed that concern in Zebeda, and I noted that there are mechanisms to read in counsel and that other countries, including our allies, often do that. I just wanted to give you a chance to give me your thoughts on that.
Yes, Justice Gorsuch, we made all those arguments in the D.C. Circuit, so there was a flurry of...
This is what it sounds like, I think, when a justice is amenable to your arguments. He'll ask you like layup questions like, oh, tell me why you think the government's on some fuck shit here. I heard a rumor that the government is trying to win this case with classified info that they're not even disclosing to you, which the U.S. and its allies, we don't even do that shit. Right? Tell me why you think that's some fuck shit, right? I think it's usually like, this is the type of question you'd expect to hear. The guy is like warmer to your argument, basically.
We have motion practice about whether or not the government could rely on classified evidence. Those motions were never resolved. What the D.C. Circuit did, I think you probably noticed from the decision, is say we're going to decide this case solely based on the public record. And my understanding is that's how it comes to this court. But if the court were ever...
It's interesting that Congress hasn't acted in this field. I mean, we have in the FISA area, lots of opportunity. They have regulated this area, and it does seem like an area that Congress might want to pay attention to, given the increased appeals to secret evidence.
And they won't. Oh, shit. Oh, fuck. Gorsuch just turned me into a fucking conspiracy theorist. Fuck me. Fuck. Wait, no, hold on. That I would literally be a conspiracy theorist. Who introduced this legislation? Because why won't they? So the question is, why is there nothing about data protection or data security or data anything in here? And the answer is, maybe. The answer is because it won't impact the US social media companies. Why would we want to regulate them in any way, size, shape, or form? Ooh, I think that moves me. I think I'm moving much further in support of TikTok and ByteDance here. All of these things will solely, for the purposes of data protection, this shit... In fact, you could argue that this act is criminalizing a thing that Facebook, X, and Google could just legally start doing. Imagine, it could literally be there's no law against this. Let's say that this law goes through, TikTok and ByteDance are out, and tomorrow Meta says, or they wouldn't announce publicly, Meta engages and they'll declare it a FAR, they'll do what they need to. But let's say that ByteDance on China's side says, oh, hey, Meta, we just want to start buying all your user data. Is that cool? And Meta's like, yeah, sure, we'll sell it all to you. Is there a law preventing that? They would just do that. So the same thing that we'd be worried about happening with TikTok and ByteDance could literally just happen with any other company. Ooh, that's a... This law is supposed to protect U.S. data so much. Why are there carve-outs for other types of companies? And why does the language seem to target TikTok with surgical precision, e.g. only foreign-controlled companies and only foreign-controlled companies and, or no, wait, hold on. It would be only companies that are both foreign-controlled and social media companies.
The government has made in recent years. Last question for you. Could the new administration, after January 20th, Mr. Francisco suggested that it might be able to extend the deadline, even though if you were to lose here by January 19th? Is that possible as you read the law?
I'm not sure it is. I'm not sure. Maybe that's a question for the Solicitor General. But
Oh, it certainly is. I thought maybe I'd give you a chance, too.
So, as I understand the law, it's 270 days unless extended. And once that time runs, I'm not sure you're talking about an extension anymore.
Okay.
There's ex post facto law that kind of does this
Got
stuff.
it. Thank you.
Can I take you back, Mr. Fisher? Let's say I agree with you that if you're talking about content manipulation.
Wait, hold on real quick. So somebody's saying this bill was already introduced and passed, Protecting Americans' Data from Foreign Adversaries Act of 2024. So there is a law against this? Wait, how do I know if the law is passed or not? This says passed the House of Representatives on March 20th. This says received in the Senate, read twice, and referred to the Committee of... Oh, that's the latest action. So this hasn't been passed into law yet. Bro, if this doesn't pass into law, what the fuck? Why didn't they... Wait, okay, there must be a reason why, right? Okay, remember, listen, okay? I know some people will do like fake humility or whatever, but I'm truly being humbled, or I'm truly like trying to hedge carefully here. Because when this lawyer started talking, I said, this guy sounds like a fucking retard. Okay, he's super retard compared to the other guy, but he's actually made a lot of really strong and really good arguments, I think. Maybe some that are even better than the previous lawyer, okay? So that's why I'm saying be careful, okay? I'm wondering if, well, the first guy didn't, I don't even know if there's time for the second guy. They're talking about like, well, we can't expect the government to pass every single law at once. Sure, but if we were truly worried about the transfer of data, ooh, this one even came up before, right? I'm guessing it's in chronological order. This is HR 7520 and this is HR 7521. Why is Congress stalling on this Data Protection Act from foreign adversaries, but they seemed very eager to pass this one to ban TikTok? Wait, somebody said this bill is already dead? I'm surprised that this hasn't been referenced by any of the lawyers. Oh, as of January 3rd, 2025, it's considered dead. Damn. Wait, wouldn't TikTok even be covered under that Data Act too? Yes. They would be. Wait, hold on. Wait, I'm so confused by these fucking sites. This site says, so this is HR 7520. Wait, this site says status enacted and initiated. This site says it has passed. This bill passed the Senate as HR 815. It is signed by the president on April 24, 2024. Making emergency supplemental appropriations for the fiscal year ending September 30, 2024. Wait, what? Maybe it got packaged into this? Control F data. Data from Oh, wait, hold on. So does this mean that this was the bill that was suggested, but this bill was rolled up into this giant, was this the spending bill or whatever the fuck else or whatever? This division makes it unlawful for a data broker to sell, license, rent, trade, transfer, release, disclose, or otherwise make available specified personally identifiable sensitive data of individuals who reside in the United States to North Korea, China, Russia, or Iran, or an entity controlled by such a country. Sensitive data includes government-issued identifiers, financial account numbers, biometric information, genetic information, precise geolocation information, and private communications, e.g. texts or emails. Wait, could you make names or logins and passwords available? A data broker generally includes any entity that sells or otherwise provides data of individuals that the entity did not collect directly from the individual. Oh wait, this is just for a data broker. A data broker generally includes an entity that sells or otherwise provides data of individuals that entity did not collect directly from the individuals. Yet a data broker does not include an entity that transmits or an individual's data or communications at the request or direction of the individual. Only entity did not collect directly from the individuals. This one calls out only data brokers as well, though, right? Is Facebook considered a data broker? Would they be considered that? Data broker. The term data broker means an entity that, for valuable considerations, sells, licenses, rents, trades, transfers, releases, discloses, provides access to, or makes available data of United States individuals that the entity did not collect directly from such individuals to another entity that is not acting as a service provider. Like, I feel like Facebook itself might not be considered, like the social media website might not be considered a data broker, but like Facebook ads, because I'm sure that Facebook ads collects data from me that I didn't submit to them. Like, they know my geographic location or whatever, even if I don't type it in, or they could, right? Recently, online services like Google and Facebook have become de facto data brokers. While they do not typically sell access to the collected data directly, they instead use collected data to build powerful advertising services that have data on. Yeah, okay. Okay. All right. So this did pass. These these types of fucking spending bills, these aren't like temporary, like these emergency things, right? Whatever passes as part of this is also like now part of law, right? Like, this stuff doesn't go away.
That's an inherently content-based rationale for acting. So if Congress had passed a law that says we hate the content manipulation that TikTok is doing, that's strict scrutiny land, and I don't know that the government can do that, however important and the interest. But that's not what Congress is doing here, and this is the same kinds of questions that I asked Mr. Francisco, because if let's take it as a given that Congress actually can do whatever it wants with respect to a wholly foreign corporation or a foreign government. And so Congress could act with the intent to interfere with the content manipulation that a foreign corporation is doing. And so now we're in this strange world where we're saying they can't act with respect to TikTok. They could act with respect to ByteDance. Why isn't this Congress acting with respect to ByteDance in the sense that all it's doing is saying ByteDance has to divest, and then TikTok can go about its business, use whatever algorithm it wants, use whatever content moderation policies it wants, just like everybody else does, choosing from everything that's available on the open market?
So let me answer that question in two parts, from the perspective of the creator Americans who want to use this platform to speak to other Americans. So the first thing is, what the act does, as you said, Justice Kagan, is prevent us from working with a application that is owned by ByteDance that uses this algorithm. Well, that's exactly what we want to do. That's our editor and publisher of choice that we think best disseminates our speech.
Yeah, but what I'm saying to you is, if you just assume a world without TikTok, where it's only ByteDance, and you were trying to say, well, we really want to work with ByteDance, and Congress was saying, we think ByteDance presents national security interests, and they don't have First Amendment rights. They're just a foreign corporation. I think that in that case, the government, I mean, tell me if you think this is wrong. It just doesn't matter that you have creators who want to work with ByteDance, because ByteDance is a foreign corporation with no First Amendment rights. Is that what you're contesting?
So that is what I'm contesting. So you said two things, though, so I could be clear. There's two aspects. Do we have a First Amendment right to work with a foreign company or even a foreign country to publish our speech? And then there's a national security part that you put into that, which goes to the justification.
Forget that.
Forget that, yes. Let's do that. So if that is right, Justice Kagan, then American creators have no right to make documentaries with the BBC. They can't work with Al Jazeera if Congress...
Well, the question is do you have a right to work with any foreign company or with every foreign company, right? I think that's the difference here, right? Is it I don't know the laws. I should look it up, actually. I don't know. What are the laws against associating with terrorist groups? Could I go make a documentary with ISIS? I don't know if I'm allowed to do that. Are Americans allowed to work for terrorist organizations? If anything is illegal, it must be this, right? Providing material support. What about just working? Let's say ISIS contacts me. They're like, we're going to 1099 you, bro. We're not going to ask you for donations. So you can't provide any property, tangible or intangible, or service, including currency or monetary instruments or financial securities, financial blah, 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 blah. Or what about in exchange for work or payment or whatever? There's no way you can do this. I can't. That's material support. Is it material support? When I go to work for my boss at McDonald's and I flip cheeseburgers, am I providing material support for my boss? No, I'm doing a job. No.
wants to prevent that, any number of other publications that are state-owned wholly or partially, and even under Lamont, remember, where you're not even creating speech, you're just listening. That was speech from China that the court said you have a First Amendment right to receive.
So would I be right to say that your position is that because of the users who want to associate and want to partner with this foreign corporation, the foreign corporation ends up having, in your view, the exact same First Amendment rights as your users do? In other words, it's irrelevant that the foreign corporation doesn't have First Amendment rights.
I don't think it's irrelevant, because you could imagine a situation where no American distributor or speaker wants to work with that. But let me put it to you this way. The Communist Manifesto, written by Karl Marx, has no First Amendment standing on its own in America. But if a bookstore wants to sell that publication, I don't think Congress can prevent it from doing so.
Ooh, that's really interesting. Is that true? If al-Baghdadi would have published a book about how to resist the United States and then sell it, even if ISIS is designated a terrorist organization, even if he was on the foreign whatever bullshit, if somebody wanted to republish his work in the United States, yeah, but I don't know if that's relevant here. I'm sure you'd be allowed to, but is it relevant?
Well, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm fine.
No.
I'm good.
Okay.
Oh, she didn't have shit to say. Oh, that's one of those moments where someone is gonna argue you, and then you got to respond, and somebody else goes to cut you off. You're like, oh no, you go, because you don't have shit to say. But it's okay.
So I want to press you a little bit on the distinction, because in Lamont, the prohibition worked directly on the American. You have to specifically request this information that comes. This is working kind of as Justice Kagan's questions were pressing you. This is working on ByteDance. It's not saying to your creators, you can't post on ByteDance. That's indirectly going to happen if ByteDance chooses itself not to permit TikTok to walk away with the code. So does that matter, that distinction between Lamont and this case?
No, for two reasons. One, under the Sorrell case, you look to not just the law itself, but its practical operation. And the practical operation is prevent us from working with ByteDance. So that's one answer. And you bring up Lamont, and Lamont's actually a very important case, I'm sure you all recognize here. It's important to look not just at the court's opinion, but look at the briefing in that case. The government itself never came in and argued there's no right to receive this information. That's the sort of greater argument. All the government argued was, of course Americans have a right to receive this, but it's just not so much of a burden to require them to raise their hand to get it. So Archibald Cox, when he was the Solicitor General, said to the court quite explicitly in the brief, we're not even going to make this argument because we think it's so contrary to history and tradition. All we're going to argue is the burden isn't enough. Now what happened is the DC Circuit kind of turned that upside down and said, oh, Lamont's just a case about the burden. Well, that's because that's the only argument the government was even willing to make in this court. There was no argument that Americans didn't have the right to hear that speech.
What about, so I think this goes to Justice Gorsuch's questions about antitrust divestiture. Let's say that for antitrust reasons, or let's.
Why is it that some people like have their middle name in their name? Why is that the case? Like, why does she go by Amy Coney Barrett instead of Amy Barrett? Like, why do some people do that?
Let's even say not for that. Let's say for suspect First Amendment reasons. Congress tells Jeff Bezos that he has to divest in the Washington Post. He can no longer own the Post. And let's say that neither Bezos nor the Post challenges that. But let's say that you represent clients who really like the Post as it was, who really want to keep receiving the Post, who really want to publish op-eds in the Post.
Yeah.
Would you have standing? Like, what kind of a claim would you be making there?
I believe so, Justice Barrett, and the court has cited Lamont in other cases in more recent years to say we've recognized a right of American listeners to receive information from others. And remember, even that is that's only a small part of the argument I'm making on behalf of the creators. I don't mean to diminish Mr. Francisco's arguments on behalf of the company and ByteDance, but the core speech in front of you in this case are the videos and other forms of communication that people like my clients are posting by the millions every day on this platform to share with other Americans.
Can you win is it possible for you to win and Mr. Francisco to lose?
Ooh. I think Francisco's got the stronger argument. But I think he should say, yeah, of course. He wants to say he's got the stronger argument, no?
Rise or fall together?
No, I think it's possible.
Yeah, obviously.
I mean, I don't think we should. But
how is if he gets a free speech strict scrutiny implication and Francisco fails his free speech argument and doesn't get the strict scrutiny review?
Was it possible for you to win and him to lose? I mean, you want to win.
Let me put it this way. If you were to conclude that something about the corporate ownership structure, and I think there was some conversation about this earlier, impeded Mr. Francisco from being able to assert full-throated First Amendment rights in this case, I would step in and say, well, certainly we can do that and get you to the strict scrutiny.
Yeah, so it all comes down to the standard of review, yeah.
Then the arguments pretty much line up. Then you're in a question of, can the government satisfy strict scrutiny? And I think, Mr. Chief Justice, you asked about, do we have cases for this and that? I think that the idea is, yes, we have cases that say, once you're in strict scrutiny, that regulating the content because you don't think it's going to be pro-American enough or it's going to be too pro-foreign interest is just verboten under the First Amendment. That's the history and tradition. And Justice Kavanaugh, when you asked about the broadcast cases, they're grounded not just in scarcity, but they're grounded in scarcity in a particular way. And it has to do with the absolute need Congress has for licensing in a world of scarce resources. And so that's the very small carve-out that even in Turner, the court wouldn't extend to cable television that exists for broadcast licensing. And if you look on the 200 plus years of our country for any other example of foreign ownership of media being regulated by Congress, let alone being permitted in the case law, you are not going to find it. And I think the reason why is because everybody has understood that if you're not in a world of scarcity where licensing is impossible, you cannot give the government, and in this more extreme example, the president himself, unbridled discretion to choose who is a proper owner of a speech platform in this country. Because it is so hand in hand with...
It is pretty crazy that it seems like the president himself is carved out and given the ability to make these declarations. That seems really weird, but... or maybe it's not weird at all. Maybe, I mean, who else would if not the executive who's tasked with enforcing the laws? I don't know.
with viewpoint. As I said earlier, any number of owners of big media enterprises, whether they be Americans or foreign citizens, could be accused of having a particular viewpoint, but speakers who engage in those platforms have choices they can make. And so, on behalf of our creator clients, we find it not at all satisfactory to be told, well, look, just go post somewhere else. It's not enough to tell a writer, well, you can't publish an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal because you can publish it in the New York Times instead. Just like here to say, you can publish it on Instagram or some other platform, not just TikTok. TikTok has a distinct editorial and publicational perspective, and it particularly benefits people like my clients who are not famous people, they're not actors from Hollywood who have a lot of people following them, they're ordinary American citizens whose content that they create on the platform gets privileged by way of the quality of that content. And that's what's so powerful about the platform. So whether you're an ordinary American citizen, or I might add, whether you're a presidential candidate in our last election, if you want to reach new and different audiences, TikTok is the place people go.
This may not make any difference for constitutional purposes, but just out of curiosity, I'd like you to explain.
What is your percentage sway at right now? Well, now my mind has been poisoned because I hate our fucking domestic tech theaters. I just don't think it's fair that I just feel like this law doesn't accomplish anything besides I feel like this is economic policy. I feel like that's what we've written in Congress. We're just protecting our domestic social media firms because I just don't feel like this does anything of noteworthiness or value for anything. Like, what if ByteDance made like China Talk, or somebody just made a social media company that was just hosted in Russia or hosted in China or hosted in whatever else, and Americans could access it? Wouldn't you run into a lot of the same problems? Or would it be blocked in the U.S.? Does the United States block access to any foreign websites? I don't think the U.S. as a matter of law does, right? I don't know. I think that if this bill had carved out more for data protection, then I think I would feel differently. But right now, I'm like 75 against it. But we haven't heard the defense's arguments yet, so.
What the practical consequences would likely be for your clients if TikTok went dark, as Mr. Francisco put it. There, I assume, is a great demand for what TikTok provides. And if TikTok was no longer there to provide what your clients really want, is there a reason to doubt that some other social media company would not jump in and take advantage of this very lucrative market?
There are two reasons, Justice.
Wait, hold on, what?
And if TikTok was no longer there to provide what your clients really want, is there a reason to doubt that some other social media company would not jump in and take advantage of this very lucrative market?
There are two reasons, Justice Alito. One is many of the declarations from my clients actually explain they've tried on other platforms to generate the kind of audience and engagement they've been able to on TikTok, and they've fallen dramatically.
Yeah, I know they haven't so far, and I'm just wondering whether this is like somebody's attachment to an old article of clothing. I mean, I really love this old shirt because I've been wearing this old shirt, but I could go out and buy something exactly like that. But no, I like the old shirt. Is that what we have here, or is there some reason to think that only ByteDance?
I fucking hate this analogy because isn't TikTok newer than everybody that stands to gain from this? TikTok is newer than Twitter, now X. It's newer than Facebook. TikTok is newer than Snapchat, right? It's newer than all of these. So I hate this analogy for that reason.
ByteDance has devised this magical algorithm that all of the geniuses at Meta and all of these other social media companies, they couldn't. No matter, they put their minds to it, they couldn't come up with this magical thing.
I think
they didn't. They had to copy. Arguably, TikTok was the leader here, right? Short form content came and failed in the United States in the form of Vine. And I think we all just it seemed like short form content like that just was never going to be profitable, never going to exist. And then it wasn't until TikTok came in and did it that then we saw YouTube Shorts, then we saw Reels from Instagram and Facebook.
think empirically, other companies have been trying for a few years to catch up with TikTok and replicate it and have been very unsuccessful. And so that ought to tell you something. And so just imagine the algorithm here as a collection of thousands of editors. Imagine the floors of an office building being filled with a collection of editors. You could imagine a situation where that collection of genius that is on a particular floor cannot be replicated by another group of people. And that's kind of what you have here.
All right, I understand that.
Thank you, counsel. Justice Thomas? Anything further, Justice Alito?
Yeah, one other question. I'm intrigued by your
I think Reels and Shorts may unironically just die if TikTok dies. They are both much worse. Doesn't matter. I think Reels are really successful. Shorts, I think, will be fine too. Both companies will gain. Both companies will gain. They'll be in real good spots. I think Reels has a fuck ton to gain from this. And Shorts and probably X will as well. Do you think TikTok is more left-leaning or right-leaning? I feel like that's where like all the commie dudes are at. God damn, dude. Conservatives are up. Conservatives have gone full oligarch. Conservatives are up so strong right now. Oh my goodness. The authoritarian oligarchy comes together.
Mount Healthy Hunter versus Underwood argument. I mean, maybe you're right, but Mount Healthy arose in an entirely different context where you're trying to get to an employer's motivation. Hunter versus Underwood involved an extreme situation where the court looked at the records of a state constitutional convention and came to the conclusion apparently that racism was the only motivation for what was done. But it does seem to me to be potentially quite unworkable and contrary to what we've generally said about legislative intent to apply the Mount Healthy framework to a congressional enactment. Do you recognize or do you acknowledge that would be very difficult? Because when an act of Congress is passed, there could be more than 250 different motivations for the votes that were cast by the members.
Yeah, I totally understand that. And in Hunter, the court actually engaged with that problem to some degree. And what Hunter said is, to avoid that problem, we're going to look just at two things. One is the state's brief, which I'd say is the Solicitor General's brief by comparison here, and the text of the law. And here, that's the only thing I need to rely on to get you to the place that they wouldn't have enacted.
Well, it gets you to the place that this was part of what motivated Congress. But why does it get you home? Well, particularly when there's a severability clause in this act.
It can't be only part of it. It has to be enough to sustain the entire act, or at least the parts that you wouldn't sever from the act. And so I think the reason why is because it's not just the content recommendation algorithm part that can be theoretically, I guess, severed out. It's also the covered company provisions, and it's just the whole approach of the statute that is based on content, not on data security.
All right, thank you.
So, okay.
Justice Sotomayor?
No, I'll save it for the SG.
Justice Kagan? Justice Gorsuch? Justice Kavanaugh? Justice Jackson?
One quick question. You repeatedly say that, from your perspective, the government's motivation is that the content might be too anti-American or too pro-China, et cetera. So that's why you think this is a content-based restriction. But I guess I'm curious if you would say the same thing if the government had articulated its rationale as saying, our motivation is to limit foreign interference in American social media platforms or discourse. Isn't that a different motivation from the standpoint of how we characterize this?
Well, wouldn't that be a poison pill? You can't limit foreign interference. If somebody wants to pay me money to have a certain message in the United States, you have the right to do that. I don't think, no, the government can't fucking stop me. That's my right to do that as an American citizen, no?
I agree, but then the question I would ask if the government said that, which I think kind of in the reply brief, maybe the government does say that, is that how on earth are you then serving a national security interest? If all you're doing is just saying, we don't like a foreign country rearranging cat and dance videos, it's hard to come in and make a national security argument. So the only way you get to national security, which is the government's own argument, is to look at the substance that's being rearranged and say, we don't like the way the substance is going to be rearranged and curated differently.
Thank you.
Thank you, counsel.
All right, let's hear the other side on this.
General Prelogar.
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court, the Chinese government's control of TikTok poses a grave threat to national security. No one disputes that the PRC seeks to undermine U.S. interests by amassing vast quantities of sensitive data about Americans and by engaging in covert influence operations. And no one disputes that the PRC pursues those goals by compelling companies like ByteDance to secretly turn over data and carry out PRC directives. Those realities mean that the Chinese government could weaponize TikTok at any time to harm the United States. TikTok collects unprecedented amounts of personal data, and as Justice Sotomayor noted, it's not just about the 170 million American users, but also about their non-user contacts who might not even be engaging with the platform. That data would be incredibly valuable to the PRC. For years, the Chinese government has sought to build detailed profiles about Americans, where we live and work, who our friends and coworkers are, what our interests are, and what our vices are. TikTok's immense data set would give the PRC a powerful tool for harassment, recruitment, and espionage.
I'm just trying to see. The Solicitor General is, where does this sit in the DOJ? She's the fourth highest ranking individual in the DOJ. Aren't there a lot of like fourth highest ranking individuals? Hold on. Oh, they report directly to the AG. Never mind. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Is there a solicitor's office or? Okay, so whatever. Okay. The Solicitor General is the one who represents the government in cases before the Supreme Court. Okay.
On top of that, the Chinese government's control over TikTok gives it a potent weapon for covert influence operations. And my friends are wrong to suggest that Congress was seeking to suppress specific types of content or specific types of viewpoints. Instead, the national security harm arises from the very fact of a foreign adversary's capacity to secretly manipulate the platform to advance its geopolitical goals in whatever form that kind of covert operation might take. The Act addresses the threat of foreign adversary control with laser-like focus. It requires only divestiture of TikTok to prevent Chinese government control. And that divestiture remedy follows a long tradition of barring foreign control of U.S. communications channels and other critical infrastructure. So no matter what level of First Amendment scrutiny applies,
critical infrastructure?
This act is valid because it's narrowly tailored to address compelling national security threats. Now, my friend Mr. Fisher just emphasized, and I acknowledge, that millions of Americans enjoy expressing themselves on this platform. But the important thing to recognize is that the act leaves all of that speech unrestricted once TikTok is freed from foreign adversary control. The First Amendment does not bar Congress from taking that critical and targeted step to protect our nation's security. I welcome the court's questions.
Is there any difference between content manipulation by a non-U.S. company as opposed to a U.S. company?
That's a good question. This is why I would have felt differently if there were more data protection provisions in there, or these same types of disclosures. Well, this isn't even asking for disclosures, but were made by domestic U.S. companies, right?
I didn't hear Mr. Fisher make a distinction between the two.
Yes, and I think the important thing to recognize is that the act here is targeting covert content manipulation by a foreign adversary nation. Now, I understand my friends to say—
What couldn't there be covert action? He's about to say covert action by a domestic organization? Cambridge Analytica.
Does that make?
The difference is that there is no protected First Amendment right for a foreign adversary to exploit its control over each platform.
The difference between covert and non-covert.
So I think that Congress's concern with the covert operation was that a foreign adversary could effectively weaponize this platform behind the scenes in order to achieve any number of geopolitical goals. Here are some of—
Why couldn't a domestic actor have similar feelings or similar ambitions, no?
The examples that come to mind. One of the pages out of the playbook here is for a foreign adversary to simply try to get Americans arguing with one another to create chaos and distraction in order to weaken the United States as a general matter and distract from any activities that the foreign adversary might want to conduct.
Couldn't a domestic organization do this as well?
What do you mean by covert, though? I mean, does covert just mean it's hard to figure out how the algorithm works?
Also, covert is addressed with disclosures then, no? Like if you're so sad, you're not mad about it being covert. You're just mad that they're doing it at all. Because if they were to make disclosures or whatever, you'd still be against it, right?
Because we could say that about every algorithm.
No, the covert nature of it comes from the fact that it's not apparent that the PRC is the one behind the scenes pulling the strings here and deciding exactly what content is going to be made to appear on the site. And another way that the
It's just because we don't know that China's behind it? That's what covert means?
Well,
True.
It doesn't have anything to do with the difficulty of figuring out what the algorithm is doing. It's just because people don't know that China is pulling the strings. That's what covert means?
What it means is that Americans are on this platform thinking that they are speaking to one another, and this recommendation engine that is apparently so valuable is organically directing their speech.
Who is this person? Wait, this has nothing to do with what's being said. These arguments are dog shit. Hold on, wait. Damn, dude, what the fuck? This person's like my age. How old is the Solicitor General usually? Jesus. 44 years old. Damn. Damn. Okay, well.
To each other. And what is covert is that the PRC, a foreign adversary nation, is instead exploiting a vulnerability in the system.
Well, if that's
to
all it
suppress and
means, that
silence
like people don't know that China's behind it, like everybody now knows that China is behind it.
No, but it's the specific content that's being manipulated would be unapparent. And so I think
that's true of every search engine. I mean, you can take any of these algorithms, whether it's X or whether it's
Google.
You name it. What are the new ones? Blue Sky? I mean, none of these are apparent, right? You get what you get and you think that's puzzling. And it's all a little bit of a black box.
She's an amazing litigator and has argued amazingly in other cases. If the arguments she makes sucks, that pretty much means that there aren't any good arguments. I guess ultimately it's not up to her if the U.S. or no, the government has to respond to every challenge, right? The government wouldn't just not respond. That'd be like a constitutional crisis, huh? You would expect the job of the federal government, the job of the executive branch would be to defend the laws passed by Congress in front of the Supreme Court against potential litigants, because that's their job, right?
So you can't just mean it's a black box, it's covert. They're all black boxes. And if you just mean what's covert is the fact that there's China behind it, I mean, honestly, really, like everybody does know now that there's China behind it. So I just don't get what this covert word does for you.
I think the problem with just saying, as a general matter, China has this capability and might at some point be able to exercise it and manipulate the platform is it doesn't put anyone on notice of when that influence operation is actually happening, and therefore it doesn't guard against the national security harm.
I feel like she still hasn't used any, she hasn't differentiated the fact that it could be China or anybody else. Or I don't know, maybe that's not what the questions are focused on and I'm just misunderstanding, or?
From the operation itself.
Isn't that a pretty paternalistic point of view? I mean, don't we normally assume that the best remedy for problematic speech is counter speech? And TikTok says it could even live with a disclaimer on its website saying this can be covertly manipulated by China. In case anybody were left in doubt after today about that possibility. So you're saying that won't work because?
That won't work because it is such a generic, generalized disclosure that it wouldn't put anyone reasonably on notice about when it's actually happening. And the example I've been thinking
That's your best argument? Just make the disclosure more specific. What?
about
best
is
argument is that the average American won't be able to figure out that the cat feed he's getting on TikTok could be manipulated, even though there's a disclosure saying
the
it could be
feed is being manipulated.
But imagine if you walked into a store and it had a sign that said, 1 of 1 million products in this store causes cancer. That is not going to put you on notice about.
But we literally, I feel like that's the worst example, because we literally have laws like that, right? That that this is carcinogenic, that this could cause a health issue, or that this could cause a thing, right? We literally do that.
What product is actually jeopardizing your health? And I think that's roughly equivalent to the type of disclosure they're contemplating here. They brought up the example of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA. There you have to disclose the actual content.
If that's true, then wouldn't that be true for all social media companies, for all content?
Yes.
I mean, every editor, every newspaper in its editorial room makes decisions about what it's going to run and how it's going to say it. And every algorithm has preferences, whether it's domestic or foreign. And nobody really knows exactly when those editorial decisions are being made or how, but they're generally aware, and we think that's enough.
I think, though, that there is a real risk that when a foreign adversary has control of that kind of mechanism and a speech platform in the United States, it could weaponize that platform to harm United States interests. And one of the key ways that the PRC flexes this muscle is to suppress speech.
General, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're not arguing about the compelling interest, we're arguing about the tailoring.
Right. And so I guess what I would say, you began by saying the cure for concerning speech is counter speech. Here,
Noel Francisco was Trump's Solicitor General. Now he's defending TikTok against this one. Wait, is that true? No shot. That sounds crazy. Wait. This is like a Suits episode. It's personal. Oh, he was a Solicitor General. Under Trump. He was the first Asian American. Wait. Filipino? Oh, come on. Oh, come on.